You're muted. Sorry.
Thank you. That is the saying of, well, it was the saying of 2020. Apparently it's now the saying of 2021 as well. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm going to start sharing my screen while I say this. Oh, not that screen. That screen. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Yes. Okay. I'll start it when we get going. But for those of you who don't know, I am the program manager for REACH and the Business Education Network at the Chamber. The purpose of the Business Education Network is to connect local high school and college graduates with local job opportunities. We have plenty of high demand careers in our very own area, but many of our graduates leave. So our goal is to keep them here. REACH specifically focuses on high demand entry-level careers. So I work with a lot of middle school, high school, and college students in the program. And then we also have, we always seem to have interns at the Chamber as well. And somehow they always end up under my supervision. You know, got to figure out how to really change that. But anyway, I'm just going to share a little bit about working with interns, and the perspective that I'm coming from is that younger student perspective. Just that we all talk about different millennials and Gen Z and things like that. So just some of the things that have helped us deal with those generations of students that, you know, the next generation is always awful. So yeah, so I'm just going to share a few things. Because I'm in presentation mode, I'm not able to see everyone. So if you have a question, I'm not going to be able to see anybody like raise their hand, but just pop in, speak up, put it in chat, whatever. So I'm happy to do that, very flexible. It's totally fine. So without further ado, we'll start the presentation. How to get the most from your intern. So I always start with humor. So because of that, brace yourself. The interns are coming. And it seems like that sometimes. So some of the reasons you want to hire an intern, we, especially as students are coming through both high school and college, they're being taught different things that those of us, depending on how long we've been out of high school and college, it's a new perspective. So that's something new or something good to take advantage of. We all know that they can program IT in their sleep. So that's much better than we can do. It's a trial period. I bet all of you know someone who was hired as an intern and then they became a full-time employee. That happens a lot. If you have bigger projects or tasks to help with, that's another reason. And brand advocates. So for nonprofits, this is an especially important thing because all of you have probably had interns who now that they've worked with you are huge advocates of your nonprofit. So this is an additional kind of a brand ambassador for those students who have been interns. Even if they don't stay with you, they're always going to have good things to say about your nonprofit when you worked with them. So reasons not to hire an intern. You need free labor. I hate to tell you, but it actually takes a lot of work to work with interns. You probably already figured that out, but it might be free labor, but it does take your time. Second point, if you're too busy, you're not gonna be able to supervise an intern. And if you don't have any specific goals in mind, like, oh, we're just gonna have an intern help out. Unless you know specifically what they're working on and the tasks that they're working on, especially in terms of what you need to track with them and projects, you know, what they know that they're going to work on, it's going to be a very difficult internship because it'll be a little bit too nebulous to supervise. I will warn you all, if anybody's done the color personality test, I am gold, so I am very much a structure. And I do to-do lists and things like that. So that's why this works really well for me. But I will say that some of the things that we've put into place have really helped in terms of tracking what are you doing? What are you working on? Did you complete the tasks you were supposed to complete this week? So I might be a little bit on the extreme side, but it definitely helps when working with an intern. So let's see what's next. Apparently nothing. Oh, there it comes. We all know the risk of hiring an intern. You could get the person on the left who likes to play games or talk on their phone or chat with their friends all day, or Instagram, or they Instagram everything they're doing at your business, and they get background pictures of private information. Yeah, we've all heard of a nightmare intern, but then we've also heard of the superstar intern that ends up getting hired or offered to be hired, and hopefully stays on. So before you hire an intern, determine which projects you're going to have them work on, and they have to be projects you're willing to let go of. Meaning that, again, the structure person in me, I sometimes will admit that I fall back on, well, if I want it done right, I just need to do it myself. That's a common thing. Or let it go and then they didn't do it right, so take it back. You need to be willing to let this go. Obviously, you'll be a part of it because you're supervising them and talking them through it, but they need to be able to use their own ideas. They need to be able to potentially learn from mistakes, and they need to be able to, and I got a note about this later, to own a project so that they can refer to them like on their resume or future interviews. So you need to be willing to let go of something for them to work on. Be realistic about who will actively supervise. So what I mean by this, and I know Christy will forgive me, Christy is not a gold. Christy is not into structure. She is definitely, she sees the forest and I see the trees. So Christy has really, really great ideas and really visionary thoughts about where to go and what to do and the events that we're going to have. But the details are not Christy's strength, which is probably why the interns get sent to me, because I am into the details. So even if the person that the intern helps the most is someone like Christy, you're going to want somebody who's very actively supervising, that's going to be able to keep track of the tasks, the to-dos, did you get this done? Who do you need to call? Things like that. So it needs to be a very conscious choice as to who's going to be able to supervise the intern and break it down into those steps. So create a detailed check to list of tasks. So if you're doing like the chamber, we do the golf classic. One of the things we need to do is reserve the golf course. Well, it needs to be a little bit more specific than that, because we want them to contact the golf course, but then they need to confirm the date and they need to get approval from the executive director. So it needs to be very well laid out. If you just say reserve the golf course, they could call and say, great, we'll take this date without asking price, or maybe the date is a conflict, or they didn't check with the alliance to make sure it's not conflicting with someone else's date, things like that. So you're going to want to make sure that you're pretty clear on what you're asking. Excuse me. You're also going to want to make sure that you set aside time in your schedule for daily and weekly meetings, and make yourself available for those quick text, call, Zoom, email, things like that with general questions and knowledge and information. So set aside that time to check on those task lists. And then I mentioned this earlier, is there one special project, like a big project that they can own? So for example, with the golf classic, which that's Christy's baby, she'll never let it go. But if that is the project that we choose for the intern to oversee, that's the one that they're really going to be able to try out new ideas potentially. They're going to be able to write about it in their resume, talk about it in their interviews, because they'll have beginning to end complete experience on that project. Or maybe it's our chamber intern this year is working on updating the How to Start a Business booklet. So even though everybody else on the staff is working with her, answering questions, guiding her, helping her, that's her project, so that she knows, and all of the responsibility for that rests on her. So obviously I'm checking in with her, but that's her baby. And then have very clear expectations. And this is where we get to the generational issue with the students. So it's going to have to be very clear. When we talk to our interns, we talk about things like, well, now everything's remote. So that's one thing to talk about. But in other times, we would also talk about how many hours are you expected to be there? Is it on your schedule? Do you need to put it on your schedule? Do we work in person? Are you expected in the office? Can you do work from home? You need to work without outside distractions. And when I say that, that means like Instagram can't be on in the background, or you're not going to be able to take text and phone calls from family members. Obviously, emergencies override all of that, but you want to be very, very clear about exactly what you're expecting during their time. So you also want to make sure, because I know some of the folks here, you're going to have to mention things like no pictures of the inside of the building can be posted on social media or things like that. You have to be absolutely clear on this. With this generation that lives on social media, you're going to have to cover all of that. This generation is also, and for any of you who have teenagers, they're used to having 6 different browser tabs open, and their phone and their tablet and whatever. They're used to being, connected to everybody everywhere. So you're going to have to say it in no certain terms, like none of that's happening here. You need to focus on work only. It's expected that you take personal calls and texts outside of work time, things like that, to make that distinction between their social media life and their work life. What does open communication mean? Because everybody says we need open communication, but what does that mean? Does that mean that you're going to have a daily meeting every morning to talk about the tasks? Does that mean that you're going to spend an hour each day physically working in the same space, or virtually working in the same space so you can talk back and forth? Does that mean, again, going back to the calendar, does that mean that you always list your work hours on there? And then also very clear, because we talk to our REACH students about this all the time, we make sure that they know that they have to talk to their supervisor about the preferred method of communication. So for example, if your supervisor prefers that you call them and let them know you're out sick for the day, you need to honor that. If your supervisor prefers texts or emails, you need to let them know that as well. So just be very clear about what that looks like. I will say, and this has been very strange for me, but we just talked about them having 6 different browsers in their phone and their tablets and everything else. It is not uncommon for the students or the younger generation to be in a virtual room like this, but not actually talking to each other, if that makes sense. Like they might be working on something or doing art or doing their homework, and they're just in an open Zoom screen or an open Google Meet. And so it's kind of like they're in the same room, in that sometimes they'll talk and sometimes they won't. But it's not like we're used to having a Zoom where it's focused conversation, and when you're done talking, you're done with the meeting. Oh, no. These students don't mind just staying in there and studying together or working together, even though they're not doing anything, they're just sitting on the screen. It's very strange to me, but that's kind of the reality. Not my generation. Clarify the dress code. Yeah.
A question. Would you say with, the new technology, which is new to, is new in my generation, but the generation coming into these internships, they're really tech savvy and in social media. How does that hinder the communication? Like, what have you found that's really different in how to work with them on the communication portion?
Yep. So I will say that when we say that they're tech savvy, that means that they're really great at those social media applications. They're really great at online and digital, and they're whizzes. They understand marketing. It's just instinctual. Talking about brand management is is actually like, that's a very common thing in this younger generation. But when it comes to actual business communication, and we talk about this with our Reach students. We had a very important lesson the first year of Reach, because we told students that our businesses were going to call them and offer them an internship. Well, apparently teenagers don't set up their voicemail, and they don't even, like, if they don't recognize a number, they won't answer it, which makes sense now that I know it. But they didn't have their voicemail, they didn't answer the phone, so they didn't know that somebody was looking for them. So that communication is, that was an important lesson. So now we teach the students how to set up your voicemail, how to leave a voice message, how to write a professional email, how to write a professional text, how to, if you're commenting on LinkedIn or on a professional post in Facebook, what it needs to look like. So we actually talk to them about, and this could be something that you work with your intern on, what does it actually look like? There's no text abbreviations, there's no be right back, BRB. There's, when you're sharing on social media, it can't refer to you can't use certain words or terminology, or if it's on LinkedIn, you don't share personal things. So we cover all of that with our Reach interns, or our Reach students, in terms of what exactly does that mean. For our Reach students, if a student sends me an email that looks like a text, I will email them back and ask them to resend it in a professional format. I've done that a couple of times with our interns as well, but typically they get it quick. Another thing that I usually do is, before an intern sends out an email that is to stakeholders, or like it's a very important email, I ask them, especially the first month or so until I get a sense for their communication style, I ask them to send the wording to me first before they send it out. So for example, for our Reach students, we send out an email newsletter to them every other week. Well, for the first 2 months, I had our intern send me the email first so that I could proof it. And then once we went through and made some updates and some changes, and we got a feel for what's expected, and I got a feel for her style. We aren't doing that anymore because she's got it pretty well down. But again, that's something that I had to take the time to make sure that she was comfortable with. We've had the same thing for interns who do newsletters and things like that, to make sure it comes to me first, so that I can proof it before it goes out to some very important people. So does that help, Stacy?
Yeah, it's I think sometimes when we bring interns into our door, we forget that some of that skill building, that professional skill building, isn't so immersed in, high school and college classes now. Mm-hmm. So I value that you brought that up, because that's something definitely our team needs to focus on. Like, we will have to do some of those professional skill building things before we get a little deeper into mm-hmm. what we need to do. So it's just good to hear your perspective on it. So thank you.
Sure. The other thing is, I mentioned earlier, they're really digital and social media savvy. That does not transfer to Microsoft Word, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint, things like that. Most of the schools are now using, many schools use Google platforms, so they aren't used to Word and Excel. They're used to the Google option, which is very similar, but not the same. So don't assume that the students understand how to operate those things. Actually, that's one of the common things we hear from businesses, is that students don't know how to use Excel anymore. So just know that if they're going to be working in Excel, you're going to have to take the time to get to know that. So any other questions on that one? Okay. So clarify the dress code. If they're working remote, this is especially important. We've all seen the business on top and pajamas on the bottom, but it also needs to include things. And I've had these conversations even with graduating seniors from college about You know, belly shirts are back. Who'd have thought? Anyway, they're back. And sheer tops or V necklines or like different conversations like that. I even had at one time, I had an intern who wore a V-neck shirt, which is typically not a bad thing, but we were at a children's event. And so she was bending over a lot. So that meant that a V-neck was probably not appropriate to wear if you're bending over. Lesson learned. Now I make that suggestion when we're at different things that this might potentially be an issue, but just things to talk about, acceptable dress code. And right now, if leggings are not acceptable at your office, you have to say that, because leggings are just, they're here. And if you've seen the high school and college hallways, that's what they wear. So if leggings don't work for you and for your office, you're going to need to make sure you say that to them. We've actually had to take some Reach students shopping because they only own leggings. So, and then you have to be willing to have really tough conversations that can be uncomfortable, that are meant to be learning moments, like some of the ones that I just mentioned. You're not able to take that phone call from your cousin. That shirt you wore was not actually, wasn't the best choice. Let's try something different. Things like that. So you have to have some of those tough conversations. The other tough conversations that you might have are missteps. So if they sent up an email before you proofed it and it was sent out to your stakeholders and the information was not exactly what you needed it to be, or they managed to step on the toes of one of your coworkers, things like that. These are all learning moments and they're here to learn, but none of us are comfortable with those conversations. So you have to be willing to tackle those conversations because they are supposed to be learning about this. And then this is where the structure in me comes out. So I apologize to all of you who are not gold. And for those of you who are gold and are into structure, welcome to my world. No. Anyway, weekly planning meetings. So in addition to, this is typically what we do with when our students are working on different projects with businesses in their internships, but then also when we have interns at the chamber, is yes, they have a list of overall big picture projects that they're working on, but we also do weekly planning meetings with them. And really that's more about planning ahead, looking behind, and making sure that they know what they're supposed to be working on. That also helps in terms of supervision because you know what you're supposed to be checking in on. If anybody else is like me and you suffer from DRS, don't remember stuff, that's me. I don't remember all the details. So then having some kind of a plan to check in on, and oh, that's right, I assigned you this task, did you get to it? Things like that. It's really important to have something like that. If you're in person, it's a little bit easier to kind of do that on the flow, but if you are remote, you absolutely have to have some kind of a list because you may only talk to each other like in a Zoom once a day, and you need to be able to really focus on those steps and what's going on and guide them through what they're doing. So you're going to want to review what they worked on. What did they miss? What did they have problems with? Are there things that you need to help with? So for example, the how to start a business book, the initial ask for ads, our intern sent out, but it's not uncommon that your stakeholders, when they hear from somebody they don't recognize, they don't necessarily answer. So she didn't get as many answers as she wanted, expressed that as a challenge. And so then I sent out an ask, included her, to say, yes, we're actually doing this. This isn't just some strange person asking you if you want to take an ad out. So that we were able to do that because she said to me, like, I've only gotten so many responses, things like that. That also gives you a chance to look back and say, hey, I heard from so-and-so that this didn't work, or this was a struggle, or whatever. Conversation topics. And then look ahead to what do they need to work on. So this is where, like, those task lists that you may have made earlier, like if they're working on the golf classic, typically, 3 months ahead of time, we're working on this and this and this. Do you have questions about anything you need to get done? This is what we need to see by the end of this week. Well, so you can go ahead and talk about all those tasks. Once you have, like, this all needs to have a timeline. And then again, allow for teachable moments. This is why we need to do it by this date. We need to have it confirmed by this date. We need to have the ad by this date because whatever. So for example, we start advertising the golf classic about 2 months ahead of time. Well, because of that, we need to have everything confirmed and all of the flyers and design aspects done 2 months ahead of time. Well, typically more than 2 months ahead of time. So when they understand why it needs to be done at that time, it's more likely it's going to get done. So process that, talk to them about why we need to get in the newspaper by this date or such and such. If you still use the newspaper, which, yeah. And then this sets up the plan for your daily meetings. So when you have that daily check-in meeting, or if you work together virtually the first hour, whatever, that sets up what you're checking on each day. Okay, well, by this date, we wanted to get this done. How did it go? Did you hear from people? Did you have any issues? Are we confirmed? Great, now that we're confirmed, let's do this. And so it really sets up that plan. I will say that typically, I always do the weekly meetings, but as we get further and further into the internship, I find that it's not necessary that we have to have daily meetings anymore. We still will check in about 2 to 3 times a week just to follow task lists. But once the interns get into the pattern of here's your list, here's what needs to be done, we can extend that check-in out a little bit longer. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't talk to them every day. That just means that we don't have a purposeful check-in every day. So I still get plenty of texts and emails and phone calls and things like that. But it's not necessary to have that check-in because they get into that routine. So, and then this is an optional thing. And again, this is based on my needs as a structure person, is I actually have an overall list with when we work with our interns at the chamber of what they're working on. And then when we figure out daily and weekly tasks, I add it to that list so that for myself, again, I don't remember stuff. I can go back and say, that's right, I asked her to do this. I need to check in on that. So I have a program that I use that I keep track of all the stuff that I've assigned to her and asked her to do, and that I can check in on and say, hey, that's right, we talked about this. Let's check in and see where are we at? What does it look like? Things like that. So for me, I can't keep it all in my brain. So I have an extra little list or program. Some people do it in Excel. Some people have Outlook. Some people have programs online, but to have that list to keep track of has been important for me. Otherwise, I forget all the stuff that I asked them to work on. I will say that for our other students that work on their internships through Reach, it does help to have some kind of a go-to list for them. It doesn't need to be nearly as detailed as I am, but they need to see the concrete in front of them when they first start working. So relationship building. So if you are, if your intern is part-time or virtual, this could be really, really difficult. It could also be really vital to whether they feel like they get their learning experience out of the internship. I will say that if your staff is goofy and crazy like ours is at the chamber, that's not a problem because we are crazy in every staff meeting, and building relationships is easy for us because we are crazy. But if it's something that, like, if you don't have regular staff meetings, remote or part-time, for the staff, for the intern to get involved in the staff, you're going to have to be a little bit more purposeful about integrating them into that. The first 1 or 2 weeks of the internship, you're going to want to set aside a lot of time in your schedule for them to follow you, shadow you, learn from how you communicate and send emails, meet the rest of the staff, find out what they do, get more familiar with your files, your emails, your systems at work, and then to get into the flow of what's expected for the internship. So your first couple of weeks are pretty heavy in time, and you're going to want to make sure that you don't start an internship the week of a major event, for example. Like, that's probably not a good idea. That would be like baptism by fire, but you don't necessarily know what you're getting into, so it could create some issues. So not all of your time should be spent on work. Now, this is my special reminder because I am very structured and task oriented. So I tend to get to the tasks and like, did we do this? Did we do this? Did we do this? And I forget to do things like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Or I heard you're getting a dog. What kind of dog are you getting? Like, you're going to want to get to know them. Part of the reason for that is relationship building. But the other part of the reason is that I try really hard to support our interns in terms of future career aspirations. So when I'm talking to our Reach students and they're interning at Miller Ingenuity, talking to them about, well, what did you do? What was that like? Who did you meet? How did that fit? Do you think this is going to be something that you want to explore more? How do you do that? And those are the conversations where I find out, well, I thought I was interested in this, but I really think I'm interested in this instead. And so then I can contact somebody and set up another job shadow or something like that. So same things with our interns at the chamber. That if there was one of our interns who was going into event planning, that works out perfect for me. But I also was able to get her connected with a couple of other event planners that were employed by the business to plan their events, so that she could talk to them about what her future ideas were, where the businesses she wanted to work for, just to get a better idea of what she was looking for. So it helps to do that career exploration and guide them through that as well. So it's not what you know, it's who you know. So if I can get them to talk to a couple people, that's great. And then watch out for inside jokes. Because if you have a crazy staff like us, we have a lot of inside jokes. But when somebody comes new to the team, especially an intern who's feeling intimidated, inside jokes can be kind of hard. So make sure you explain them when they pop up, but then also find ways to have new inside jokes or new shared stories, shared experiences. As silly as it sounds, having those like getting to know you bingo and those kind of activities actually can be really good to get your intern involved with the staff. And it is there's always some kind of a silly joke that comes out of those games. So it's a good way to start new inside jokes. So have some fun. Oh, I'm almost done. So above all, an internship is a learning experience for the student, but because I am all about humor, it really is. Your internship will be filled with learning opportunities. So that is what I have to share about our internships. I don't know what I missed or if you still have questions, but I'm happy to answer, to share more. I'm happy to talk about what our interns or what our students at Reach are like, their personalities, their quirks, their, what working with that generation has been like. So I ask away.
Nicole, that was very good. I wrote down 2 sheets of notes, so thank you.
Thank you.
How has it been with the transition to all of a sudden being a very virtual world? And how have you been able to do some of the same things, or what are you changing and doing differently?
Well, obviously we aren't doing our major events right now. So that has been a significant change because there haven't been as many projects to own for them. And we also have, in order to be more responsive to the time of COVID, we're a little bit more spontaneous than usual, if that makes sense. Like typically we would be planning how many months ahead of time for having this event or this activity or things like that. And we've had to just be a little bit more responsive to what's happening and change our plans. So that means that the time that we need on events is shorter, it's more condensed. We got to get a lot more stuff done. So typically, what that has meant is that logistically, we've had more check-ins. We've pulled in more staff so that we can check more things off our list as we go along. We've had more group projects, I guess is a good way to say. Instead of saying, hey, you get to plan the golf classic, it's let's all get together. We're going to split these tasks. We got to get this done in the next week. So it's actually helped with our virtual programs and events that we're doing, because it's more of a super planning is maybe a good way to put it. But then at the same time, if you think about it, when you're in the office with an intern and they have a question, they'll pop up and walk into your office or shout across the wall or whatever they'll do, and they'll ask the quick questions. So there have been a few missteps because we don't have that immediate communication. And, you know, just I'm not the only one who doesn't remember stuff. And so once it passes your mind, you forget to ask about it later, and then stuff happens. So just a little bit more patience and forgiveness for that. Thankfully, in the time of COVID, our stakeholders are completely understandable when we own up to those errors. But we have had to be more on top of our intern schedules, meaning that when my intern says I'm working remote from 9 to 12, she needs to be working remote from 9 to 12, same as if she was in the office. No outside distractions, no Instagram, no email outside, no social media. So even though it's virtual and there isn't anybody there checking in on them, that's still something that I make very clear in our expectations, that when you're working from 9 to 12, whether you're in the office or not, it's the same expectation. So I can't guarantee that that's what's happening, but I at least say it so that they know that that's the expectation. So, but it has, you know, being remote has helped with our communication because we have to be more purposeful. It's not perfect, but it's better.
I was gonna ask, I don't know, are any of your interns paid, or is it all volunteer, all for
volunteer.
experience? Yeah.
So couple different responses. First of all, the Reach internships are paid. That is part of our internships are supervised by the Department of Labor program. And those are paid internships or work experience. Now, granted, for our Reach interns, they're in manufacturing, healthcare, building. The chamber specifically, we typically, in a normal year, it's telling me my internet is unstable, so I'm sorry if this isn't working, but in a normal year, we have a line item in our budget for a part-time intern. And that's something that we've had for many, many years. Obviously, in the time of COVID, that line item disappeared. However, there is a program through Career Force that our current intern is working with Career Force in this program, and they pay her internship wages through, I believe it's through WIOA or something like that. But if you are searching for options for internships that don't necessarily require payment, you certainly can connect with Career Force on that. I will say, however, that there's only maybe a handful of students each year that work through those internships with Career Force. So there's a good possibility that those 5 students wouldn't necessarily be in your area, but it is an option. It is a connection. We have worked on short-term projects with college students that are not paid. So for example, we've had some videos filmed. We've had some or videos edited, I'm sorry, or we've had students do little, not like golf classic tasks, more like very specific 10, 20 hours or less projects, and those are volunteer projects. So for us at the chamber and for our Reach students, they are paid, but many, many internships are not. When I worked at Winona Health, our interns were not paid.
Well, and that's what we've had a lot of unpaid interns because they've been doing it for credit and things like that. But I do have
Yes.
some funding that might allow me to pay an intern, but I'm not really sure. Does anybody, I don't know if you know or if anybody knows what is a going rate? Like I mean, I'm sure it runs the gamut, but if there's any place to look to find what is kind of a standard in an industry or in an area or
Mhm.
what's the minimum? I don't know if
Yeah.
you know or if anybody else knows where to
Well, I
start.
will say, just based on this, what I hear from our reach students. So fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you are, what is considered low um, is anything below about 11 or $12 an hour. Now that's very atypical, but the reason for it is that our job demand is so high that even McDonald's is offering 11 or $12 an hour. Even Walmart is offering 11 or $12 an hour. Like many of our, what would typically be high school, college level, entry level jobs or jobs that they work while they're going to school, pay much better in Winona than in other communities. So that does mean that what our students at Winona State, St. Mary's, the high schools, Cotter, are going to expect is a little bit higher than a typical community. So two things, and they both end up around $12 an hour. For our reach internships, our manufacturers got together the first year of the program, and they realized that our students, our wonderful students, aren't going to choose necessarily who they think is going to have the best experience. They're going to choose the business who has free pizza Fridays or the highest pay. Whether it has anything to do with their career goals or not, doesn't matter. If it's free pizza Friday, that's where they're going to want to work. So our manufacturers got together and decided as a group, without any guidance from me, that across the board, a reach internship is $12 an hour. That allows them to bring them on board and take them up to the base rate of pay, which is actually a little higher. And then also for our interns, when we had money in the budget, it was $12 an hour for our interns at the chamber. So not, $20, $30 an hour, which would be terrific, but not $8 an hour, which is a little bit more common in other communities. So that's just gives perspective to the Winona community. Not that that's what you have to do, but that's
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
yes. And Brian is looking for a job that has free pizza Friday. So if anybody else does, oh, everyone does. Okay, Miller Ingenuity has free pizza Friday. So give him a call. Anything else? No? Well, you all know where to find me. And again, I work with a lot of college and high school students. So let me know if you have any other questions. If you wanted to hear our current intern, Michaela, actually graduated from the REACH program last year. She didn't go into healthcare or manufacturing or building trades. She's going into marketing, but she still has the soft skills experience. So if you wanted to hear from the perspective of an intern, she would be happy to talk to you. So let me know if I can help with anything else.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you so much for being here today and talking to us.
Sure.
Brian did say that he recorded this, so he'll send it to the members that weren't able to be here so they can get the knowledge as well. So we very much appreciate it.
Yep, this
Thank
will go
you.
out. Oh, sorry, Nicole. I was just going to mention this will go out in the notes, the link. And so please feel free to share it with staff members, anybody else. So.
All right, well, that concludes our meeting for today, everyone. We're done a little bit early. Time is amazing now.